It was a typical Thursday evening in the quiet, affluent neighborhood where the protagonist, Alex, lived. The streets were always clean, the lawns perfectly manicured, and the neighborhood charming, safe, and serene. After a long day of meetings, Alex was grateful for the calm, the predictability. The sound of birds chirping echoed through the open windows of their car as they cruised down the main street toward their home. But tonight, something was different. As Alex pulled into the driveway, the usual reassuring glow of the streetlight that illuminated their driveway was missing. It was strange. At first, Alex thought the bulb had burned out, but a quick glance around revealed that not just their light, but every streetlight along the block had been turned off. The street, which had always been a warm embrace of light, was now swallowed by darkness. Alex's first instinct was to call the local utility company. Perhaps there was a fault, or a sudden power outage. But as they glanced at the nearest light pole, a cold shiver ran down their spine. This wasn't a simple outage. The pole was bare, no light, no wires, just an empty metal skeleton reaching into the night sky. A tight knot of dread began to form in the pit of Alex's stomach. They stepped out of the car and walked toward the streetlight's usual spot. The emptiness felt off, unnatural. What was going on? Alex quickly turned to their neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, a friendly woman in her late 50s who lived next door and knew everything about the neighborhood. "Hey, Mrs. Johnson, did you notice that all the streetlights are off?" Alex called. Mrs. Johnson came to the front door, adjusting her glasses. "It's not just the lights, honey," she said, her voice filled with concern. "Didn't you hear? The HOA president, Karen, is behind it all." Alex frowned. "Karen, what do you mean?" Mrs. Johnson lowered her voice, glancing around nervously before stepping closer. "The HOA's been planning to improve the neighborhood. That's what she calls it. She said the streetlights were too bright, that they disrupted the aesthetic of the area. She petitioned to have them removed, said it was about preserving the natural beauty. But everyone knows it's just another one of her moves. It's not about the lights, it's about control. She's been targeting small things like this for months now." Alex stood frozen, the weight of Mrs. Johnson's words settling heavily in the air between them. Karen, the notorious HOA president, known for her aggressive enforcement of rules that no one ever quite understood. She had a reputation for meddling in other people's business, rewriting rules as she went. But this, removing the streetlights, it felt like a strange new low, a move that crossed a line. "I didn't think she'd go this far," Alex muttered, clenching their fists. "Who does she think she is?" Mrs. Johnson looked around one last time before speaking again. "I don't know, but I'd be careful, Alex. She has a lot of influence. And if she's starting with the streetlights, what's next? Be careful around her. Don't get on her bad side." The warning hung in the air like a thick fog. As Alex turned back toward the house, a sense of unease gnawed at them. This was no longer just about a streetlight. This was a message. Karen was testing her power, and Alex had no idea just how far she would go to bend the neighborhood to her will. But one thing was clear. Alex wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not without a fight. The neighborhood, once their sanctuary, was now a battlefield, and the first shot had been fired in the most unexpected way. The following day, Alex couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in their gut. The streetlights, once a comforting beacon at the end of a long day, now felt like the first of many cuts in the invisible war Karen seemed to be waging against the entire neighborhood. The more Alex thought about it, the more unsettling it became. Why had Karen removed the streetlights? And why had no one spoken up? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Alex began to quietly observe the neighborhood's dynamics. They spent the day talking to a few neighbors, trying to learn more about Karen's long history with the HOA. They'd always known she was the president, but her influence had never felt this ominous. Something had changed. Something was brewing beneath the surface. Later that evening, as Alex sat in the backyard with a cup of coffee, they overheard a conversation between two neighbors at the fence that piqued their curiosity. "Did you hear about the latest decision?" Lisa, the next-door neighbor, asked her husband, her voice tinged with annoyance. "Karen's pushing for more restrictions. She wants to change the entire layout of the park next to the community center. She's got this whole plan for renovations that's going to raise everyone's dues." Alex's ears perked up. Higher dues. That wasn't just about lights anymore. Karen was playing a bigger game. "I heard she's doing all of this to make herself more powerful." Gary, Lisa's husband, replied. "She's been telling people she's got big plans for the neighborhood. Honestly, I think she's trying to run the whole town. She's been working on getting more control over the HOA board, manipulating everyone who dares to disagree with her. It's like she's not just running an HOA anymore. She's building an empire." Alex's heart raced. Empire. This was no longer about aesthetics or streetlights. This was about control. Power. Something much darker than anyone had imagined. Unable to ignore the suspicion that Karen's tactics went far deeper than petty rule enforcement, Alex decided to dig into her past. If Karen had been working behind the scenes to build her empire, there had to be a paper trail. Alex spent hours poring over old HOA meeting minutes, tax records, and neighborhood gossip, looking for any sign of irregularities. What they found was enough to make their skin crawl. It turned out that Karen had been using the HOA's influence to push through controversial changes that only benefited her. New zoning laws, illegal fines on residents who didn't toe the line, and worse, an entire network of shady deals designed to inflate property values in her favor. She wasn't just controlling the neighborhood's aesthetic, she was creating a system that lined her pockets. But there was more. Alex discovered a series of mysterious transactions tied to a company Karen owned, one that was, oddly enough, linked to several other HOA members. The transactions didn't add up. The amounts were too large for something as trivial as community improvements. It was as if Karen had built an entire financial network based on exploiting her power within the HOA. Alex sat back in their chair, staring at the documents spread out on the table. A cold realization washed over them. Karen was a master manipulator, and everything she'd done had been part of a grander scheme. This wasn't just about a streetlight. This was about control of the neighborhood, of the HOA, of the money. The question wasn't if Karen would go further. It was when she would strike again. And Alex knew they were now in her crosshairs. But they couldn't back down now, not with the truth staring them in the face. The game had changed, and Alex was going to play it with everything they had. The battle had just begun. The next few days felt like a storm was building. Every time Alex passed by the now emptied streetlights, they couldn't shake the sense of being watched. Karen's influence seemed to be everywhere, her iron grip on the HOA, her constant presence in every decision made about the neighborhood. But Alex wasn't about to let her win. They needed a plan. Something that would shake the foundation of Karen's empire and expose her for what she really was. That's when the opportunity appeared. It came in the form of Jacob Masters, a businessman whose wealth was as undeniable as his reputation. He owned a multi-million-dollar tech company and, more importantly, had recently moved into the neighborhood. Rumor had it he didn't care much for the HOA's restrictive rules, which was music to Alex's ears. Jacob was someone with power. Someone who could stand up to Karen, or at least expose her. One evening, Jacob invited Alex to a private gathering at his sprawling modern mansion. "It's a small get-together," he said, his voice smooth as silk over the phone. "Just a few people from the neighborhood. I thought it'd be good to get to know you better." Curiosity piqued. Alex accepted the invitation. The mansion stood out like a modern fortress on the edge of the neighborhood, a stark contrast to the cookie-cutter homes around it. As Alex pulled up to the long driveway, their eyes were immediately drawn to a gleaming black Bugatti Veyron, parked near the entrance. The car was a masterpiece, sleek, powerful, and worth more than most people's houses. Inside, The atmosphere was refined but tense. Jacob greeted Alex with a glass of wine, his grin as polished as his surroundings. "I know how these HOA meetings can be," he said with a chuckle. "But tonight, we're going to talk about something else entirely." As the night wore on, Alex began to notice the subtle tension hanging in the air. The conversation drifted to the HOA's latest decisions, the new restrictions on property renovations, the looming increase in fees, and of course, the removal of the streetlights. People murmured complaints, but no one seemed to have the courage to say anything directly. It was as if Karen's shadow loomed over them all, chilling them into silence. That's when Jacob leaned in, lowering his voice so only Alex could hear. "You know, I've been meaning to speak up about the HOA," he said. "That woman, Karen, she's been nothing but trouble since the day I moved in. She's tried to extort me for more money under the guise of neighborhood improvements. She's so obsessed with control, she doesn't care who she steps on." Alex's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What exactly is she doing?" Jacob's eyes glinted with a mixture of frustration and amusement. "Let's just say she's been leveraging the HOA for personal gain. Zoning laws, building permits, you name it. She's been using her position to inflate property values around here, all to line her pockets. She's turning this whole neighborhood into her playground." Alex's mind raced. This was bigger than just the streetlights. It was about money, manipulation, and control. Karen had built a network of power, and Alex was just a pawn in her game. "I know how it sounds," Jacob continued, "but I've got resources. I've got connections. And if you're willing to dig into her dirty little secrets, I can help. Together, we can take her down." The offer hung in the air like a challenge, one that Alex wasn't sure they could refuse. Jacob wasn't just a neighbor. He was a man who knew how to fight. And he had the means to make it happen. But there was a catch. In return for his help, Alex would need to get their hands dirty. They'd need to investigate Karen, dig up every shred of evidence of her corruption, and expose her. It was a dangerous game to play, but Alex could feel the stakes rising. As the night wore on, the conversation turned to casual chatter, but Alex's mind was elsewhere. Karen's grip on the neighborhood was tighter than ever, but now, for the first time, there was a chance to break free. All they needed was the right leverage, and Jacob's Bugatti, parked just outside, was a reminder that power could be bought, and influence could be wielded. The decision weighed heavily on Alex's mind. Aligning with Jacob could be the key to unraveling Karen's empire, but the path forward was as uncertain as the future of the neighborhood itself. Would this risky alliance lead to the justice Alex had been hoping for, or would it drag them deeper into the web of power, corruption, and danger? The night had only just begun, and Alex knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same. The night of Jacob's private gathering remained etched in Alex's mind like a dream they couldn't shake. The mansion, the sleek Bugatti, the whispers about Karen. It all felt like a dangerous game they had unwittingly entered. But as Alex drove home that night, a sense of resolve began to replace the swirling doubts. They had made a choice, and now there was no turning back. The following evening, Alex found themselves once again walking toward Jacob's mansion, this time with a deeper purpose. Jacob had made it clear. They needed to act. They needed to uncover Karen's secrets, expose her manipulation of the neighborhood, and maybe, just maybe, bring her empire crashing down. As Alex approached the massive front doors, they couldn't help but notice the subtle tension hanging in the air. The house was alive with guests, yet the energy felt off, too poised, too rehearsed. People moved in carefully calculated patterns, drinks in hand, exchanging polite smiles. The sound of laughter and clinking glasses echoed through the hallways, but the surface calm belied an undercurrent of anxiety. Jacob greeted Alex with his usual charm. "Glad you could make it," he said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "There's something you should see." The two of them slipped away from the main party and into Jacob's study, a room lined with shelves of rare books and expensive artifacts. A sleek, modern desk sat against the far wall, its surface neatly arranged with papers, a laptop, and several photos. Jacob slid a manila folder across the desk of Alex, who picked it up with a mix of anticipation and dread. "This," Jacob said, his voice low, "is just the tip of the iceberg." Alex opened the folder, revealing a series of documents, emails, and photographs. The first thing that caught their eye was a set of zoning permits, signed by none other than Karen. There were multiple discrepancies. One of the permits, dated just a few months ago, authorized a major renovation project for a property right across the street from Alex's house. The catch: the property's owner wasn't listed in any public records. "There's no way she got that permit legitimately," Jacob explained, his fingers tapping the papers. "The property's been in her name for years, but she's hiding it. This whole development plan, it's a front for something much worse. It's all about inflating the value of properties in the neighborhood, manipulating the market to her advantage." Alex's heart raced. This wasn't just a few shady deals anymore. Karen was orchestrating a massive real estate scheme that affected everyone in the neighborhood. Everyone except her, of course. "Look at this," Jacob continued, pulling out another sheet. It was an email exchange between Karen and a local developer, their words laced with veiled threats and promises of kickbacks. Karen had been using her position as HOA president to broker illegal deals and secure lucrative contracts for herself. Alex's mind raced as they read the email aloud in disbelief. "We can make this happen, but the prices need to be adjusted. I'll handle the HOA approval. We can make the whole block luxury, but I'll need a bigger cut." Alex slammed the papers down on the desk, a surge of adrenaline flooding their system. This wasn't just about Karen manipulating the HOA rules. This was about entire neighborhoods being manipulated for profit, all at the cost of the people who lived there. Before they could process everything, Jacob's voice dropped even lower. "That's not even the worst part. She's been buying up properties, not just in this neighborhood, but all around the city. They're all tied to one company. A company she controls, but no one knows about. It's all designed to make her richer, more powerful. And the worst part, she's been using her influence over the HOA to make sure the authorities never catch on." Alex's blood ran cold. The web was far deeper than they'd ever imagined. And now, they were trapped in the middle of it. But this was no time to back down. Karen had built her empire on lies and manipulation. Alex now had the power to tear it down. As they looked over the documents again, piecing together the full extent of Karen's operation, Alex felt something shift inside them. They weren't just a bystander anymore. They were a player in this dangerous game, and the only way out was to go after Karen head-on. "Are you in?" Jacob asked, his voice steady but his eyes sharp. Alex looked up, meeting his gaze. The stakes had never been higher, but there was no turning back now. The pieces were falling into place, and if Karen thought she had everything under control, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. "I'm in," Alex replied, their voice filled with quiet resolve. "Let's take her down." But even as they said the words, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap that Karen had been setting for far longer than they realized. The real game had just begun, and the stakes were higher than ever before. The next few days were a whirlwind. Alex had committed to Jacob's plan. No turning back now. The documents, the evidence, everything was laid out in front of them like pieces on a chessboard. But there was one crucial part of the plan that couldn't be ignored: the Bugatti. Jacob had been clear. The car was more than just a symbol of his wealth. It was part of the game. And right now, it was sitting just outside the mansion, a sleek, powerful target in plain view, its shiny black paint reflecting the dim streetlights in the distance. Jacob had promised that if they could execute their plan properly, the Bugatti would be the key to making Karen's fall happen faster than she could imagine. But there was a catch. Jacob had asked Alex to do something they hadn't fully understood at the time: provoke Karen. Draw her out, Make her act in a way that revealed her true nature. This would be the moment that Alex had to pull the trigger, without hesitation. The question was, how? It came to Alex in the middle of the night, the eerie glow of their phone screen illuminating their face as they reread the text from Jacob. She's got a soft spot for cars, especially high-end ones. Make her jealous. Make her think someone's playing her game. A slow smile crept across Alex's face. That was it. The next morning, under the cover of a clouded sky, Alex took action. They'd heard that Karen had a routine, a strict, almost obsessive schedule. And today, she'd be at the HOA office, buried in paperwork, oblivious to what was about to unfold. Jacob's mansion was quiet, the perfect backdrop for what Alex had in mind. They knew exactly how to push Karen's buttons. Alex grabbed the spare keys to Jacob's Bugatti, hidden safely in a drawer in the study, and approached the car with a growing sense of anticipation. They slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool under their fingertips, the engine hum filling the air. This wasn't just any car. It was a symbol of everything Karen wanted, but could never have. It was more than just a vehicle. It was an object of envy. With one final glance at the empty streets, Alex drove the Bugatti out of the driveway, careful to stay under the speed limit as they made their way toward the heart of the neighborhood. The familiar streets that once felt like a safe haven now felt like a battlefield. Every turn, every corner held the potential to escalate the stakes, but Alex kept their focus on the endgame: provoke Karen, make her act. It wasn't long before they found the perfect spot, the edge of the neighborhood, right near Karen's house. Alex parked the Bugatti in a visible spot, under a row of trees, and left the engine running just enough to catch attention. The glint of the chrome wheels in the sunlight was irresistible. Moments later, Alex saw her, Karen, striding down the sidewalk, her eyes immediately drawn to the car. It was like watching a predator lock onto its prey. Her expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, followed by something darker: greed. Alex watched from a distance as Karen slowly circled the car, her eyes tracing every line, every detail. The envy was palpable, almost tangible in the air. This was what Karen had been working for, after all: power, wealth, control, and here was a clear sign of someone who had all of it. Then, Karen made her move. Without warning, she pulled out her phone, snapping photos of the car, likely preparing to gossip about it with the other HOA members. But what Karen didn't know was that Alex had already anticipated this. They'd left a small, easily visible sticker on the car's rear window, an anonymous logo with the words "Luxury comes with a price" in bold letters, deliberately placed there to tease and provoke. Karen's eyes narrowed, her frustration bubbling to the surface. Alex could see the gears turning in her head. Karen's reputation, her need for control, her jealousy of those who had what she could only dream of. The seed of suspicion had been planted. In that moment, Alex knew they'd made the right move. Karen was hooked. She couldn't let this go. The bait had worked. Now, Alex just had to wait. But as they turned the car back toward Jacob's mansion, a sickening sense of unease crept up Alex's spine. The Bugatti had drawn Karen's attention, but they couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what she wanted: a game of cat and mouse, with Alex unknowingly falling deeper into the trap. The neighborhood, once a place of comfort and familiarity, was now a chessboard where every move carried immense consequences. And Karen, she was always 3 steps ahead. As Alex pulled back into the mansion's driveway, they knew one thing for sure: the real battle was about to begin. And this game, it was far from over. The days following Alex's calculated move were a blur of tension and anticipation. Karen's reaction had been swift, fury laced with the unmistakable hunger of someone who had just been humiliated. Alex had anticipated the fury, but not the speed with which Karen would retaliate. They had only been back at Jacob's mansion for a few hours when the first message arrived. "You think you can play with me, Alex? Think again." The message was followed by a string of threats, subtle at first, then escalating quickly. Someone had informed Karen about the Bugatti, and Alex's little stunt hadn't gone unnoticed. But what concerned them wasn't just Karen's words. It was the cold, calculating tone that bled through every sentence. Karen wasn't just angry, she was plotting. Alex's phone buzzed again, this time with a notification from the HOA's official community portal. The email was short, but its content was like a bomb dropped in the middle of their plans. The subject: Emergency HOA meeting. Immediate action required. It was rare for an emergency meeting to be called, but that wasn't what had Alex on edge. It was the timing, the day after the Bugatti incident. Karen had moved quickly, using her influence to orchestrate a meeting where she could lay the groundwork for her next move. Alex wasn't sure what the meeting was about yet, but the ominous words were enough to send a chill down their spine. Jacob was waiting for them when they arrived at the mansion, his expression unreadable. "You've stirred the hornet's nest," he said quietly, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Alex, his eyes scanning the papers on his desk with a hint of concern. "I warned you Karen would retaliate. She's not the type to let things slide." "I know," Alex replied, feeling the weight of the situation press down on them. "But she's playing her hand too quickly. She's desperate to regain control." Jacob's lips twisted into a small, tight smile. "Desperation is dangerous. It makes people reckless. But you're right about one thing. She's not going to let this go. And she'll come after you next." Alex's thoughts raced. Karen's retaliation wasn't just going to be a few words exchanged. It would be calculated. She'd have her supporters in the HOA, ready to back her up, and if she was serious about retaliating, she would move in ways Alex hadn't yet imagined. "I'll be at the meeting tomorrow," Alex said, steeling themselves. "It's time to see what she has planned." The next evening, Alex found themselves standing in the HOA's dimly lit conference room, surrounded by familiar faces who no longer felt like neighbors, but pawns in Karen's game. The long oak table gleamed under the harsh overhead lights, casting shadows across the room. Every seat was filled, the tension palpable. Karen stood at the head of the table, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of her mouth as she addressed the group. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet murmurings of the crowd. "I've called this meeting because of a serious breach of trust within this community. Recently, a certain individual thought it wise to flaunt their wealth and disregard the rules that govern our neighborhood," Karen began, her eyes sweeping over the room, lingering on Alex with a pointed look. "This behavior not only endangers our community, but undermines the integrity of the HOA." Alex's heart pounded. It was happening. Karen was setting the stage for her attack. They could feel the eyes of the room shift toward them, the weight of suspicion settling on their shoulders. "This individual," Karen continued, her voice turning ice cold, "has taken it upon themselves to challenge the very foundation of this community, and I propose we take action. Immediate, irreversible action." Alex's blood ran cold as Karen's words hung in the air. The trap had been set. The game was no longer just about light fixtures or street parking. It was about control, power, and the destruction of anyone who dared to challenge her. Alex realized with growing horror that they were now the target, the person who would be scapegoated for everything Karen had manipulated in the shadows. Jacob had warned them that Karen was playing a long game, but Alex never expected her to be this ruthless. The meeting room was now a courtroom, and they were the accused. Karen's eyes locked onto theirs, a predator sizing up its prey. "I've already spoken to the board. We're moving forward with a vote to enforce the maximum penalty for the disruption caused." She paused, letting the words settle before delivering the final blow. "This includes fines, public reprimand, and, if necessary, eviction." Alex could feel the room closing in, the walls pressing tighter with each word. They had no allies here, no support. Every decision, every move, had been engineered to bring them to this point. The trap was closing, and there was no easy way out. But Alex wasn't ready to fold just yet. This was far from over. The room seemed to close in around Alex as Karen's voice rang out, declaring them the center of the HOA's growing storm. The weight of her words hit like a punch, every accusation echoing louder in Alex's ears. Eviction. The word hung in the air, cold and final. Alex's heart skipped a beat, but they refused to show any sign of weakness. The other board members, silent and stone-faced, watched with an almost eerie detachment. It was as if they were waiting for something, or perhaps just too afraid to act. Alex's gaze flicked to Jacob, sitting at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable but his eyes glinting with the knowledge that this wasn't the end of the road. Karen's smirk widened as she saw the effect of her words on Alex. "I trust that everyone is in agreement," she asked, the hint of victory clear in her voice. The board members nodded almost mechanically, not daring to oppose her. But Alex wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. They knew there had to be another way out of this, something hidden beneath the surface of Karen's calculated show of power. The trap had been sprung, but Karen had underestimated Alex's resolve. They wouldn't back down without a fight. "You've made a mistake, Karen," Alex said, their voice calm, steady, like a cool wind cutting through the heat of the moment. The room stilled, and Karen's eyes narrowed, but Alex pressed on. "You think you have all the cards, but you don't. You don't know what I know." The board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. Karen's grip on them was strong, but Alex could feel the doubt creeping in. Jacob had been right. Desperation made people reckless, and now Karen was showing her hand a little too openly. Karen's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, really? And what exactly do you think you know?" "Alex," she challenged, her voice dripping with mockery. Alex leaned forward, their eyes locked onto Karen's. "I know about your little empire, Karen. The one built on manipulation, corruption, and illegal deals. I know about the properties you've been hiding, the developers you've been working with, and the kickbacks you've been collecting. You may think this meeting is about me, but it's not. It's about you, and I have all the proof I need." A gasp rippled through the room. The other members exchanged glances, some of them visibly uneasy, as Karen's expression faltered for the briefest of moments. But just as quickly, her mask of control snapped back into place. "You think you can threaten me with vague accusations and weak evidence?" Karen spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You're more foolish than I thought." Alex reached into their bag and pulled out the folder they had painstakingly compiled, a collection of photos, emails, and documents that tied Karen to a network of illegal dealings. They placed it on the table in front of Karen, the stack of papers thudding heavily in the silence that followed. "This is just the beginning," Alex said, their voice low but firm. "I've been watching you for a while, Karen. And you're not as invincible as you think." Karen's eyes flicked over the folder, her hand hovering over it, for a moment before she swiftly pushed it aside. "This means nothing. You don't have the power to bring me down," she sneered. But Alex wasn't finished. "No, but Jacob does." The name landed like a bombshell. Karen's eyes flicked to Jacob, and for the first time, a flicker of real uncertainty crossed her face. She knew what that name meant. Jacob Masters was a force to be reckoned with, a businessman with power, connections, and the means to go after her if he so desired. Jacob finally spoke, his voice smooth, but carrying a weight of authority that sent a shiver through the room. "You've been playing a dangerous game, Karen, and now you're going to pay the price for it." His gaze was cold, unwavering. "Alex is right. You've pushed too far, and I've had enough." The room held its breath. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the future hanging by a thread. It was clear that Karen had lost her edge, and she knew it. The board members were looking to her now, waiting for her next move, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but nothing came out. Alex had called her bluff, and the walls were beginning to crumble around her. But just when it seemed like victory was within reach, Karen's eyes hardened. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You think you can bring me down so easily. You're playing in a game far beyond your understanding. You have no idea what you're up against." Alex's pulse quickened. The warning in Karen's voice was clear. This wasn't over. Far from it. Karen stood up abruptly, sweeping the papers off the table in a grand gesture of finality. "This isn't the end. It's only the beginning," she declared, her voice sharp with venom. As she stormed out of the room, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The trap may have been sprung, but Karen was far from finished. The true battle, Alex realized, was just beginning. The storm had passed, but the air felt electric, charged with an unspoken threat that lingered long after Karen's departure. The HOA meeting dissolved into hushed murmurs, the weight of the confrontation still hanging heavily in the room. Karen had left in a huff, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors as she stormed out. The board members, once her loyal followers, now exchanged uncertain glances, their once steadfast allegiance beginning to crack under the pressure of the revelations Alex had laid bare. Jacob stood slowly, his movements deliberate, his eyes, dark and calculating, fixed on Alex with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. "You did good," he said, his voice low and steady, but there was something more in his words, a weight of knowledge and warning. "But don't mistake this for victory. Karen is dangerous, and she will come for you, harder than before." Alex met his gaze, their own resolve hardening like steel. "I didn't do all this just to walk away. She's not going to win." Jacob let out a dry laugh, but it wasn't one of humor. It was the kind that hinted at something darker. "You're right about that. But this isn't just about Karen anymore. It's about her empire, her web of lies and manipulation. And there are people involved in this game who would tear this whole town apart to protect their interests." A cold shiver ran down Alex's spine. The stakes were higher than they had imagined. Karen's reign of power didn't just extend within the HOA. It stretched far beyond, into the city's shadowy underbelly. And now, Alex had unwittingly dragged himself into a much larger conspiracy than they could have ever anticipated. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, cryptic messages, and ominous phone calls. Karen's retaliations had begun in full force, each move more calculated and vicious than the last. Strange figures were spotted lurking around Alex's house. Someone had hacked into their email account, and anonymous threats began pouring in. The tension in the neighborhood reached a boiling point, and the once peaceful community now felt like a battlefield. It was only when Alex received a final message from Karen that they realized just how high the stakes had become. The text was short, chilling in its simplicity. "You've made your move. Now I'll make mine. You're already dead, Alex." Alex felt the blood drain from their face as the message sank in. This wasn't just a power struggle anymore. Karen was out for blood. The game had escalated, and the stakes weren't just about property lines or HOA rules. They were about survival. Jacob, ever the strategist, knew that this was the final act. "Karen's not going to stop," he said, his tone grim. "She's playing her last card now, and if we don't act fast, she'll burn everything down, including us." The two of them, Alex and Jacob, sat down, surrounded by papers and plans, their minds racing through every angle of this deadly game. But there was no easy solution. Karen had surrounded herself with powerful allies, hidden behind layers of wealth and influence. And yet, as Alex looked at the papers in front of them, something became clear. They weren't fighting Karen anymore. They were fighting the very system she had created, a system built on fear, corruption, and manipulation. It was time to go on the offensive. "Enough of playing defense," Alex said, their voice steady but laced with fury. "We expose her for everything she's done. Not just here, but everywhere. Her empire will crumble, and I'll make sure of it." Jacob nodded. "It's a gamble, but it's the only play left. We take the fight straight to her." The final move was set into motion. Alex and Jacob contacted every legal avenue available: lawyers, journalists, investigators, gathering the evidence, compiling the documents, and preparing to reveal Karen's empire to the world. The plan was risky, but it was the only way to tear down the facade Karen had so carefully constructed. The day of reckoning came sooner than expected. A press conference was scheduled, and the entire city was watching as Alex and Jacob stood before the cameras. The damning evidence spread out before them like a wildfire waiting to ignite. Karen arrived at the scene, her usual smug expression replaced by a look of pure rage. She had underestimated Alex, underestimated how far they were willing to go. The crowd of reporters buzzed in anticipation, and the sound of clicking cameras filled the air. Alex stepped forward, their heart pounding but their voice unwavering. "This is the truth about Karen's empire, an empire built on lies, corruption, and manipulation. She's been using her position as HOA president to manipulate property values, secure illegal contracts, and build an empire of greed. This is her legacy." As the evidence hit the airwaves, the crowd erupted in shock. Karen's world began to unravel in real time. The press, once silent, now flooded with questions, the truth echoing across the city. In that moment, Alex knew they had won. Karen's reign had come to a brutal public end. But as Karen was led away in handcuffs, a quiet satisfaction filled Alex's chest. They had exposed her. They had defeated her. But somewhere, deep down, Alex knew this wasn't truly over. The shadow of Karen's empire might have crumbled, but the ripples of its destruction would reach farther than they could ever imagine. And one thing was certain: Alex had won the battle. But the war was only just beginning.